Would you please stand and hear the Word of God? Just see what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God. And that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that they didn't know Him. Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like Him, but we shall see Him as He is. All who have this hope in Him purify themselves just as He is pure. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down His life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. And this is His command, to believe in the name of His Son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as He has commanded us. Praise be to God. Jesus said, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be open." This should give us great hope. As we continue in Lent, I ask that you continually be asking, to be seeking, and to be knocking. What is it, O Lord, you'd have me to do? Show me what your plan is for my life. And tonight we will look at other forms of mission work that is going on in our community. And I ask that you would listen and consider what it is that you're being called to do. You know, we all were given different talents and abilities and skills, and God wants to use those things in your life. So tonight, be open. Be open to what God is calling you to do. At this time, these things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. Oh, happy day. to another Thursday Lent service, and I'm so pleased to see so many of you here tonight, and I'm just really pleased at how everybody's supported these services, and I hope that we can find it in ourselves to continue after Lent's over, and that's my hope. As a matter of fact, just a little bit ago, Angela was talking about how Angela and I met, it's been less than a year ago, it was in May. We met at a RIM meeting in Indianapolis, and he's a couple classes ahead of me. As a matter of fact, he just told me that they recommended him for ordination. So let's hear it for Angela. That's a big job. Congratulations. I can tell you, he's jumped through some hoops and he's written some words. Congratulations, Angelo. It is quite a process. People can't even imagine. Anyway, we were watching a basketball game. It was the NBA Finals. You remember?
Yeah.
And anyway, we were up, and Ronnie Bell and Angelo and I were just talking. I just met Angelo. Him and Ronnie were friends, and I went to seminary with Ronnie. And he started telling me about what he was doing here in Fort Wayne. And I just told him that I was coming here. I hadn't even been here yet. And I told him I was coming. And I told him then my vision and my hope was that down the road we could start something on Thursdays. And I talked about that with him back in May, before I'd even met you folks. And he was telling me about what he was doing, which I thought was a unique, amazing ministry. He's going to tell you a lot about here in just a minute. But right then I said, well, you'll have to come to my church sometime. I was already claiming you guys as my church. And I still claim it. And anyway, we talked, and that night we decided, we're probably going to do something together down the road. Well, finally, tonight is the first night we're going to do something together. And what Angelo is doing, I'll let him explain it, but let me just say this. His ministry is being sponsored or overseen, or it's being promoted, I don't know what word I want to use, but through the United Methodist Church. This isn't, we've had a lot of good people, a lot of good causes, and a lot of good organizations come through here, but this organization, what Angelo's doing, is a United Methodist ministry. Our conference and our district sponsors it, and so it's a little more personal maybe than some of the other things we've been talking about. And what he's going to talk about is something that you see probably just about every morning on the news. I know I see it, but it usually doesn't seem to affect me. It usually doesn't hit real close to home. I live over here. I'm not even from here. So over the last several months, Angelo and I have been talking, and he mentioned it today. It's like a mission field that's just a few miles down the street from us. A mission field. And do we think about it like that? Anyway, Angelo's going to talk to us about it tonight. I'm just so glad he's going to be here. I've got to see Angelo speak before. No, I'm not trying to put any pressure on him or anything. He's pretty good. But anyway, I'm excited he's here. Give him your full attention. And let me just remind you ahead of time, we are going to be collecting for his organization tonight voluntarily. The pans are back here. And just based on how well he does. Okay? So, no pressure, Angelo. But anyway, let's hear it for Angelo Mann.
Good evening, Taylor Chapel.
Good evening.
I gotta say, all of us pastors, we go through the same process, but we're not all created equal. You got a pretty cool pastor, so you are blessed. And I also want to say that the church where I served in Georgia before moving back to Fort Wayne, the song that we would end on at almost every service, not every service, but just about every service was "Oh Happy Day." So I'm sitting here like I feel at home. So I'm grateful to be here tonight, and there are a few things that I enjoy more than seeing a vision come to fruition. As Pastor Derek shared, it was at this table down in Indianapolis back in May. I didn't remember when the month was, but I knew it was sometime last year. I think it was the conference finals. I think the Celtics and the Cavs.
The Cavaliers.
Cavaliers,
Yeah.
back when they had LeBron James.
Yes, the
Those were
LeBron
different days.
days.
Yeah. We were watching this game, and then we were sharing at the table, and he was talking about this vision, this idea for a Thursday night in a church that he hadn't even come to yet. And look at you, here you are on Thursday night. So this is pretty cool. I love seeing visions become a reality. God's at work in this place, and I'm just excited to be a small part of it, and thankful to be able to come and share tonight. I was hoping that my family, my wife, and my 4 kids would be able to come with us tonight. My wife's father passed away this week, so we're dealing with that, and she's getting ready for us to go to Indianapolis tomorrow for the funeral. She sends her regards, wishes she could be here, and she will be here at some point down the road, because you'll invite me back, right? Depending on how I do. So Pastor Derek invited me to come and share about this vision that God has given me, this vision to start a new ministry called Alive Community Outreach, and to share how you all, how Taylor Chapel might be able to be involved in this. But I wanted to back up a little bit and tell you some of my own story. I want to go all the way back to like the mid to late 1980s here in Fort Wayne. These were days when I was wearing Scooby-Doo underwear, days when I had hair, a lot of hair, really curly hair, in fact. I got pictures to prove it. Days when I was so committed to developing my jump shot. We're in Indiana, after all. Now, I'd be out in my driveway out on Covington Road, where we live, dead of winter, 2 feet of snow, didn't matter, out there just shoveling and then get to work. Layers, nothing that layers couldn't fix. Snow, ice, sub-zero temperature, shooting shot after shot after shot after shot. And often you could find another kid out there with me, a kid named Nicholas. We called him Nick. Nick was my first cousin, but he was like a brother to me. We were always together, and if he wasn't out at my house on Covington Road, then I was probably out at his house in Village Woods on the southeast side of Fort Wayne. I was 4 years older than Nick, and so I always thought it was my duty as his older cousin to toughen him up, to make him tougher, because that's what older brothers, older cousins are for, right? Well, Nick was a big, strong kid, but I was a little bigger and stronger because I was 4 years older. He eventually became a lot bigger and stronger than me. But I had age on my side back then. And Nick loved football. He loved football. And one of my most vivid memories from my childhood was going in the backyard with Nick. And we would get all these layers on, sweatshirts and jeans and sweatpants and jackets. And I would make Nick hold on to a football and to brace himself. And I would get a running start. And I would run and I would tackle him as hard as I could, trying to get him to fumble the football. Well, if he held on to the ball, his reward was that he got to get up and do it all over again. Right? It's a good reward, I think. But if he fumbled the ball, then he'd have to do push-ups. Because that's how it works, right, Pastor? I don't make the rules, y'all. This is how life works. You fumble the ball, you got to do push-ups.
Drop it, give me 20.
He was a strong kid. Drop and give me 20. But even at 4 years younger, he didn't fumble the ball too much. He was a strong kid. So that's one of my most vivid memories of Nick. I got a little older, and as I got into my teenage years, and we had that 4 years of distance between us, I hung around him less and less and started hanging around with my own crowd. I got involved with the wrong crowd, as they say, and started getting involved in some things and some bad things. And I would say that I did a whole lot of dirt that I just happened to not get caught for. Nick, on the other hand, as he started coming of age, he started getting into some trouble himself, started getting into some trouble at school. But then he also got caught up in the criminal justice system. Got caught for something in high school, and once he got caught up in that, it was like this black hole that he could just never escape from. Just sucked him in deeper and deeper and deeper. Then he became an adult. Around 18 or 19, he ended up getting in trouble for selling drugs, and he ended up doing some time in prison. Meanwhile, my life was going great. I met this beautiful woman in 2001. We got married a few years later, started a family together. God finally got through my thick skull, got a hold of my life, and eventually called me to ministry. And then back in 2009, I felt this call to go to seminary. So we looked around at different seminaries, applied to different seminaries, and we ended up going down to Atlanta. We were in Atlanta for 8 years. We loved Atlanta. We had a lot of opportunities, a lot of incredible ministry opportunities down in Atlanta. We went down with one child. We had 3 more while we were there. Something in that Georgia water, I guess. And we started planting roots down there. We liked it. We liked the opportunities. We liked the schools that our kids were in. Lord knows we liked the weather down there. And so we were open to coming back to Fort Wayne someday after our kids got older, but we certainly weren't planning on it at the time. We were planning on just staying there, getting our kids through school, and then when we got a little older, after they grew up, we'd see what happens. All of this changed on September 13, 2016. I remember this day vividly. It was early in the morning. I was in my parsonage bedroom getting ready to go to the YMCA for my early morning workout when all of a sudden my pants buzzed, that feeling you get when you get a text message that comes through on your phone. Over the next few minutes, I would receive some of the worst news that I've ever received in my life. My cousin, Nick, was shot and killed here in Fort Wayne, along with 2 other young men. He was 30 years old, and he had 3 young children. As you can imagine, this shook me to my core. And I started making arrangements to travel back to Fort Wayne to attend the funeral, but I got to Fort Wayne, and due to some last-minute circumstances with the minister who they were working with, due to some last-minute circumstances with him, I ended up officiating the funeral, which was the hardest thing, and still is the hardest thing, that I've had to do in my ministry to date. And as I'm standing in this funeral home down on Washington, standing in this funeral home, giving the eulogy for my own flesh and blood. I was only 30 years old. It was like everything in that room was in slow motion. And all of these faces that I looked out at were seared into my memory. And as I left the funeral home and got on the plane to come back to Atlanta, all of these faces, this mental snapshot that I took from the pulpit there in the funeral home, I took this mental snapshot with me, and I just kept seeing these faces. Saw the faces of the women in the room. My aunt, Nick's mom. My cousin, his sister. Nick's fiance. Other women in the room who lost their own sons in the same way. I saw the faces of the young men, much like my cousin, who themselves were still putting their own lives at risk, fearful that that face that I was seeing looking back at me would become another face in a casket just like my cousin's. But I'll tell you what really got me. Now we're the children. The children. My cousin's own children, his 3 children, who now have to navigate this world without a daddy. But there are other children in the room as well. As I would come to learn later, both my cousin's own children and other children who were there in the room, this was just one of multiple homicide funerals that they had attended already in their young, innocent, impressionable lives. How many homicide funerals have you been to in your life? We're talking about 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds who've been to 5, 6 homicide funerals already. And so God started speaking to me. It's time to go home. It's time to go home. So I traveled back to Atlanta. My wife and I, Marie, we had these conversations. We prayed, and we prayed, and we prayed some more. Until finally, in 2017, we moved our family of 6 into my brother's home here in Fort Wayne. He and his wife loved every single minute of their newfound lack of privacy, I can assure you. They were very gracious, and thankfully for them and for us, we ended up finding our own place. And so I share this story with you because this is very personal. This is our driving motivation for this ministry that we're starting. This ministry of Alive Community Outreach. Our mission is to cultivate healing relationships with families affected by homicide. Cultivate healing relationships with families affected by homicide. And our vision, which you see on the screen, is we envision a community free from the cycle of violence. This is a big vision. This is the vision that God has given us. And so, as we hit the ground here in Fort Wayne, we started meeting family after family who lost someone to murder. It became overwhelming. I mean, this is a really specific population that God has called us to serve. Yet, this is a much, much larger population than we had even anticipated. And as we met family after family who'd been absolutely devastated, there was this scripture that kept playing in my mind like a broken record. John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come so that what? You might have life, they might have life, and have it in abundance. In abundance. I kept thinking and praying, God, I'm seeing a whole lot of the first part of this verse. I'm seeing a whole lot of stealing, killing, and destroying of life, of families, of entire communities. What, God, what does it mean, this promise of abundant life? What does this mean for families who've lost so much? What would it look like for this community, the entire community? Just not those of us in certain areas, but the entire community to be free from the cycle of violence. What would it look like for all of these families to experience life in abundance? And how in the world do we get there? What's the church's role in this? Not just the churches that are right there in the mix, in the heart of all of these things happening, but churches like Taylor Chapel, the Indiana Conference. What is our role? So out of this prayer, God gave us this vision for Alive Community Outreach. I approached our district superintendent, started having these conversations about what it might look like to launch a ministry for families affected by homicide. And not just a ministry that's a local church ministry, but a ministry where we could mobilize the entire district and ultimately the entire conference to get involved. And so the conference awarded us a grant this past year to do just that. We assembled a board. Got Tom Beaver here, who's chairing our board. He's been awesome. And our other team members have been awesome as well. We assembled this board last fall, and we've hit the ground running. And we're in this pilot phase right now, and we plan to launch more publicly later this year. And right now, we're engaging families in a variety of ways, and we're learning a whole lot. We're learning a whole lot, to say the least. As we've taken the past 2 years to research this problem, to get to know families who've been affected by homicide, we've discovered that supportive relationships is the cornerstone of restoring children and families from trauma. Supportive relationships. We've been amazed by how the trust that we've built with families has opened them up to receiving services, to receiving help in ways that they had previously just turned away. For a variety of reasons. But building that relationship and trying to offer that help within the context of that relationship has gone a long way. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to walk alongside someone. Not simply to hand them a list of resources that they can go to, or places, informing them of places where they can go for help, but really walking with them in that process, helping them to navigate all of it. Helping them to navigate all of it. To connect them with these services in the community, to remove barriers that prevent or discourage them from receiving help. It's up to parents, ultimately, up to families to receive that help. But what we found is that there are many families who haven't sought help, who haven't sought support for themselves, for their children, but they're open to receiving it when it's offered within the context of trusting, committed relationship. We've done a lot of research. We've learned a lot on the ground, and we've done a lot of research that affirms much of what we were already thinking. There's this groundbreaking report from Harvard, the Harvard Center for the Developing Child. In this report, they identify 3 principles to improve outcomes for children and families who've experienced trauma. And these 3 principles have provided the framework for our new ministry. The first principle is supporting responsive relationships for children and adults. How about that? Supporting responsive relationships for children and adults. Cultivating these relationships is the core of our mission as we personally build relationships with families, but also putting families in connection to other people, other relationships in the community that can help them in their journeys. Our report doesn't tell us this, of course, but we know that the most important relationship to strengthen is that with Jesus Christ.
Yep.
That spiritual foundation, if you don't have that, then you're on shaky ground. And so cultivating that relationship, strengthening that relationship with Christ is at the very center of everything that we do. Now, the second principle is developing core life skills. Developing core life skills. We're doing this by helping parents become responsive to their children's needs, to understanding trauma, to understanding what their kids are going through, to understanding what they're going through. We're putting people in connection with grief counselors to help them manage their own grief, their own trauma in healthy ways. We're working with the kids, working with them to develop assets, to develop skills in their own lives that they'll need to be successful, and putting them in contact and relationship with organizations like YMCA, for one, with after-school programming that are also teaching them life skills, and putting these relationships around them and teaching them how to be successful. And then finally, the third principle is reducing sources of stress in the lives of children and families. It's amazing how many sources of stress there are prior to a lot of these homicides happening, whether it be financially, housing. There are many different sources of stress that families have, and then when something like this happens on top of that, the ripple effect is massive. So working with families, we're working with a family right now to help her family find stable housing, to help her find employment. We're helping to provide transportation in places like Aaron's house. We're trying to remove some of those barriers, some of those sources of stress to make receiving support as easy as possible. But what makes all of this work, the key is relationship. The key is relationship. Building these personal relationships with families, but then through this relationship that we're building, connecting them with other relationships in the community. We're not trying to reinvent any wheels. We're not trying to reinvent any services that are already existing in the community. So partnerships are critical for us. The YMCA has been key. Aaron's House has been key. We're working on a partnership with Youth for Christ, among others. So what we've discovered is that this is going to take a village. This is going to take a village. Building these relationships, cultivating these relationships is the key to healing. It's not something that just one person or one organization can do. We have to come around these families, and especially around these children, as a community. As a community. So how can Taylor Chapel help? I'm glad y'all asked. First of all, please pray. Please pray. And I really mean that. Sometimes that's the pastor thing to say. Or we hear somebody say, pray for me, and we'll say, yeah, I'll pray for you, but then we go and we forget all about it. Listen, we need your prayer. We need you to pray for us, certainly for me, for my wife Marie, who's right there in the mix, right by my side, for Tom, for our board, for other partners that we're working with, for our families. For our families. Because, y'all, I believe that this promise of abundant life is available to them every bit as much as it is to me, to you. So pray for them, that they would experience this abundant life, this promise, in spite of everything that they are going through, that they've lost. Pray for our city. Pray for this vision. We envision a community free from the cycle of violence. What would it look like, Derek, to get up in the morning, every morning, for the rest of 2019, and not have to read articles, see news clips on Wayne TV? What would that look like? This past week, there were two shootings where somebody shot through a house. Two separate shootings in the same neighborhood. And as far as I know, they're not related to each other. In the same neighborhood. There are a whole lot of children, a whole lot of kids in that neighborhood. What would it look like if this vision came to fruition? We didn't have to do this. I could go pursue my dreams of being in the NBA or something. This isn't what any of us want to be having to do. What would that look like? What would it look like? So pray. Second, ministry takes money. Sometimes I wish it doesn't, but it does. The Indiana Conference, we're very grateful that the conference is supporting us directly through the fall of this year. But after that, we're on our own. And so we're having a lot of conversations right now, sharing with congregations like Taylor Chapel. We're looking for grants, applying for grants, having conversations with individuals. And faithful stewardship is of utmost importance to us because we understand that we have to make our resources stretch because there are a lot of families that we want to serve. And we want to serve as many of these families as possible. But because we have a big vision, it's going to take a lot of resources to see this through. And so financial support is at the top of our list of needs. But Pastor Derek has also asked me, how can people get involved from a volunteer standpoint? We're really early on, and we're in the process with our board of developing a volunteer engagement strategy. We haven't yet identified a whole lot of ways. There are a few, some with tutoring, some with helping with our children's ministry on Thursday nights while y'all are here. So there are a few ways, but we're working on developing some more ways. But the main thing right now is, if this is something that God's pulling on your heart, that you think that you might want to get involved in a personal way with some children, with our families, let us know, because we're coming up with a list and we can have a conversation and see where your hearts are, what your gifts and graces are. And then as we're developing this strategy, we'll be reaching out to folks to try to plug you in a way that makes sense for you. And so I am thankful to be here. I want to end with a story, something that's really weighing on my heart, something that has woken me up several times just this week. So I get a call back at the last quarter of last year. I get a call that there was a shooting not too far from my home, less than a mile away from where we live. There was a shooting. There was a 22-year-old who was shot and killed. And I get a call from someone who knew this family, and they knew that this family didn't have a pastor, they didn't have a church home that they were connected to. And so they asked if I would come over to this home and pray with the family, to talk about funeral arrangements, and even to perhaps plan the funeral and to officiate the funeral. And so I went over to this home and I got to know this family. I prayed with them. I learned that this 22-year-old was killed outside of his aunt's home. It was 4:30 on Sunday afternoon. More and more seemed to be happening in the middle of the day like this. He got shot on the front lawn. His 11-year-old cousin was inside the home when this was happening. He comes in the home with having been shot. And she witnesses all of this taking place, her own life at risk in the process. And so I got to know this family. And we were in contact. I was trying to get the youngest son involved with Erin's house. She had 3 boys. This 22-year-old who was killed, a 19-year-old, and then a 5th grader. I was trying to get the 5th grader involved with Erin's house, trying to get him involved with the YMCA. Well, we were in contact, and she was interested, but we fell out of touch. And I was calling, leaving messages, and just couldn't get in touch with her until just a little over 3 weeks ago. I get another call that her 19-year-old was at the hospital because he was shot. And so I go to the hospital. I don't know what to say. My wife's with me. I have no idea. What do you say? What can you say? So I went in, and I don't even know what I said. I felt the Spirit's speaking something through me, and I spoke a word. He had some of his friends, some young men who were there, tried to speak a word into them, and then we prayed. We prayed. And I took a page out of the Gospels, and I prayed, and I looked at her, and I said, "You're not going to lose another son." But I have to admit, I was scared to death when we walked away. Because that's not the sort of thing you want to say or pray for and have the opposite happen. Well, a little more than 3 weeks later, he's still in the hospital. He's going to make it. He's got a long journey, a very long journey, long journey ahead for him. I wish I could say that we've figured something out with this new ministry, this new organization that we're wanting to start, that will just, where we could snap our fingers and wave a wand, everything will be okay for this family. But I'll tell you what, we're going to walk with this family. We're going to walk with them, even in the midst of everything they've been through. We're still holding on to God's promise, to Jesus' promise for them, that they would experience life in abundance. We're holding on to that, and we're going to walk with them in this journey. We got the Aaron's House application to her yesterday. The little guy's going to start going with us out there, getting him plugged in to the YMCA, to get some other caring, good people in his life. Getting the mom connected with grief counseling. Trying to help her figure things out with housing, employment. It's going to be a long journey. But we're going to walk with them because that is what God has called us to do. What does Psalm 23 say? Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. Why? For you are with me. God is with us always. And often God is with us through other people who are willing to walk with us. And that is what God has called us to do. Amen?
Amen.
Thanks for having me, y'all. Thanks, brother.
These are our neighbors. They're not just faceless names. They live in our community. They could be your relatives. Could be children and grandchildren of friends you went to school with. And we just can't let it go. It's a problem that's not going away unless we do something about it. Now, Angelo doesn't claim to have an answer. He has a drive, has a desire. He has God on his side. So tonight, if you've been touched by what you've heard, we do have the plates at the back, and also I'm sure Angelo's going to stick around for a little while after the service. You know, if you feel like you could tutor, help teach, they probably are going to have some facility issues. I don't know what all they're going to have. Angelo doesn't know what all they're going to have. But if you feel a call to do this kind of work, just give him your name and number. And as things come up, I'm sure he'll give you a call. And we'll have you back too when things get rolling, because it's what we should be doing. You know, I'm thinking of this fifth grader. I remember how tough my fifth grade year was. I remember that. It was a really strange time in your life. You're starting to notice girls for the first time, and your life's starting to change. Your voice starts to change. Some people have to deal with the fear of knowing that they lost one of their brothers and another one's been shot, and they have to wonder, what's for me? What's for me? I don't know how some people do it. I too believe that Jesus came to bring abundance, and everybody is welcome at that table of abundance. And what you do for the least, you do for him. And I would say a fifth grader who's lost one brother and is dealing with this close encounter of a second one is probably feeling like the least about right now. We have hope. We have hope. It's what Angelo's ministry is about. It's about hope. And we have hope.